Recording in progress. Okay. So welcome to Social Worker Life. I'm Kim Beam, your host. And today we have Stacy joining us from Minnesota. Are you in Minnesota these days?
I am.
What's your weather?
It's 6 above with a feels like of -3.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
By the way, you do the word Minnesota really well.
Minnesota.
Yeah, good job.
Minnesota. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a friend who lived in Minnesota and she taught me. I know how to say loon too, like loon.
Loon. There you
The
go.
bird. The bird.
Apparently we say the word BAG very strangely out here.
Really? I call
I
it a
say
bag.
bag.
Wait, say it
Bag.
again.
Bag.
Bag. Bag. So I also spent time in Lancaster County a little bit when I was little, and for a long time I couldn't say the word HOME correctly.
Okay.
You say it.
Home.
It's home.
Home.
Home. And
Wow.
boots. Boots are said that way too. With a drop. Boots.
Yeah, roof and roof. Roof and roof.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
All
thing
right.
on the thing on anyway, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm so glad we got into a linguistics conversation. I'm fascinated by language and I'm fascinated by accents too. So this is all within my wheelhouse. When I went to England and lived there for 6 months when I was in college, I ceased to hear the difference between the British and the American accent. I just couldn't hear it. I didn't know there was a difference. And I would have to ask people, is that person British or American? And they would look at me like I was crazy. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't hear the difference anymore. And I was like, and this is how somebody falls into an accent and doesn't realize it.
Right. Yeah.
In 6 months, I stopped hearing it. So I'm probably really susceptible.
Did you move around a lot as a child?
Well, I moved back and forth between my dad's house and my mom's house, but they were 45 minutes away from northern New Jersey to middle Jersey, which some people say doesn't exist. So
I don't know.
Stanhope to Bridgewater, I don't really think it's that big an accent difference personally. Okay, so Stacy's here to join us to talk about recovery and what it's like to realize you need help and what it's like to access that help and what are some systemic barriers to getting help and basically what it's like to be Stacy. What's it like to be Stacy?
Wow. Is that the kickoff question? What is it like to be me? What it's like to be me is I am a 48-year-old woman living inside a 16-year-old's head. And yeah, and I spent most of my life avoiding addiction, or I thought I was, let's put it that way. I thought I was avoiding addictions, and come to find out that I was living and breathing all along, festering, and then
like a zit,
pandemic,
and it was just waiting to come out.
And it just did it, yeah. And then when I activated it, it took over and tried its best to kill me.
So during the pandemic, you started drinking, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, heavily, very quickly. It was supposed to be medicinal at first.
Isn't that always?
No, for real, it was supposed to be medicinal at first.
Explain.
Yes. So I had bronchitis and pneumonia right as we were shutting down that whole March 15th, 2020. And we were living in California at the time. They were having basically parking ramp, emergency room, COVID testing. It was very difficult to get a COVID test. If you finally got a COVID test, it was likely to be dropped on the ground and then, whatever, all these things. And I had 3 negative tests and in about 2 weeks, and just kept getting, re-diagnosed basically with bronchitis or pneumonia, and I was getting worse instead of better. And so I clearly did have an addiction problem beforehand because I had a flag in my chart. that I couldn't have narcotics of any kind. And so they wouldn't give me cough medicine with codeine unless I would go to the emergency room. But then I was going to catch COVID, so I didn't want to do that. And so, yeah, so I thought that maybe some Jack Daniels with honey in it would do the same kind of thing, which I'm going to tell you that it does. And, you know, it definitely helps the cough. And what went from every 4 to 6 hours for medicinal purposes turned into a full-blown addiction with lots of shots, lots of days in a row, from March until July of 2020. Yeah.
So when did you realize you had fallen off medicinal and had fallen into like self-medicating?
Yeah. I probably knew I had a problem before I was willing. Well, no, not probably. I knew I had a problem before I was willing to admit it. I probably knew somewhere late May, early June. And argued with my husband about it once or twice. I think I remember once. But I don't remember the other times. And then
Wait, does he remember other times you argued?
I think probably yes. We haven't really gone back and unpacked all of that timing because it's not very helpful for me to hear all of the damage and all of the, like, you know, whatever. So in order for me to kind of stay in recovery space, we only revisit things as they're needed.
Now, for him, does he need to talk about those things, or is he just like, you got the treatment, you're okay, we can move forward? Or does he need to go back and unpack some of that?
Yeah, so we're doing some marriage counseling, which I think is probably good for most married people, but specifically when there's a substance involved. So we're doing some of that. You know, our because the addiction stuff was probably active and alive. You know, addiction is a two-part malady. It's an allergy of the body and a obsession of the mind. And so there was an obsession of the mind that was probably running pretty rampantly ahead of time. And so there were some ways that I remember things differently than he does. And so we're trying to come to an understanding of today, not necessarily needing to go backwards as much, like trying very much to live in the present, going backwards as needed. But yeah, so doing that. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Trying not to tell his story too much because, you know,
It's his story.
that's his story and
You've got your story. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm the one who brought you into his story, so that's my fault.
Great. It's okay.
I take ownership.
Okay. Thanks.
So you're traveling down this road where you're now fighting with your husband. Your children are out of the home, both of them at this point?
Yep. Grown up, living in different parts of the country. No, both. Yeah. I mean, away from us. Yep. We actually my husband and I took a road trip out to visit the kids. They were living in Texas at the time, and I don't remember a lot of that trip. And I left the trip early, angry. I'm guessing that it was really difficult to keep up my drinking at that point without too much interference. And so I ended up jumping on an airplane and flying back to California only to get in a car and then drive to Minnesota. A friend was doing some stuff in Rochester, Minnesota, so I went to live with her for 3 weeks. And yeah, and I started letting her down, and that's kind of what actually like really helped me to get onto round 1 of recovery. It's taken me two go rounds to really get it solid. Round 1, I took myself to a meeting and tried to do the meeting thing. That worked for about 5 or 6 months. I returned to California, did the whole like, let's go back and live with our husband thing. And in some of the work of recovery, ended up telling a truth to my employer at the time that was an ask for help, and instead it got me fired. And so like leading up to that firing and all of that, I kind of just went right back into drinking because it was what was safe and whatever. So from probably February of 21 until I went into treatment in December of 21, it was kind of an off and on thing. I said this today earlier, actually, to my husband. We were talking about something, and I said, well, I might have been sober then, like thinking about like June of 21, like that week or that day, I might have been sober when we were having that conversation. He was like, well, not sure it works that way. Like just because you were sober for that day when there's not like, you know.
Yeah, there's like so much in between, and like,
Yeah. Well, and it takes a while to unwind it all, right? So, yeah.
so what was the thing that made you go inpatient?
Yeah. Great question. I'll tell you. So
Well, let me back up before you even decide that you're going to go inpatient, right?
Yeah.
What are all your thoughts about being inpatient? Like when people said you need treatment,
Yeah.
what were all of those thoughts that were like, what
Yeah.
inpatient would be? Because as a sober person, if somebody told me I needed to go inpatient, I know I would have a number of thoughts about that before I even committed to it.
Yeah. So, what's really weird is that I had kind of, with mental health, had kind of danced this dance pretty much my whole life of probably could have gone to treatment for something any given day of the week from like 1986 until whenever, right? And so I had always thought that treatment was going to be, this, I don't know, lock me away, kind of a girl interrupted experience, where lots of people there in much worse condition than me because I couldn't be bad enough for that. But maybe that would help me. But how could it help me? And I've always sort of been able to maintain a fairly decent facade of competence and sanity and all of that while everything else in here is kind of going nuts. And so I couldn't really figure out how inpatient was going to help me because to the rest of the world, I, for the most part, as far as I was aware, I was fine. And so it would probably shock them that here I am, right? Except for the few here and there. So,
does your role as your husband's wife also play into that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that I had lots of hats, right? Mom, wife, really competent worker, really competent daughter, my parents owned family businesses. I was helpful with those things. So like just the whole thing, like to look like I didn't know how to do something or that I needed help was not something I was very comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And so, treatment is sort of the ultimate surrender of both of those things, right? Mm-hmm. I'm no longer competent at running my own life and I need help running it. So, do that. And, the first go around in fall of 2020, things were working okay. Like it seemed like it was.
When you said the first go around, was that when you started going to rooms or is that when you went inpatient? Did you go?
No, like rooms. Yeah, I only did treatment once. Yeah, I only did treatment once inpatient, and then came out and stayed in all of the ways that they can, and still am, still connected to the treatment community, doing some DBT work. Woohoo! That's fun stuff.
That is fun. It's hard stuff.
Yeah, I think if somebody would have taught me DBT as like a 12-year-old, maybe my mind wouldn't have been so crazy. So that would have been good. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I was able to understand the concepts of the work that needed to be done for recovery. I was able to, I was about to say something that wasn't entirely true, which was I was about to say I could follow direction, which is not true at all. Just in case, the people that I worked with in that first go around ever happen upon this podcast, don't want them to think that I thought I was actually following their direction without at least a whole lot of questioning. But I did, part of the problem was that I just did a really good job of faking it there too. And so like, I was like, oh, this is how we act here. So I can do this here too. And it didn't do anything on the inside necessarily. Right. Yeah. So I was in fall of 21, I was trying to manage 2 different jobs. I was a school counselor at a Catholic school, and I was doing in-home mental health work with children, and I was drinking and hiding it from my family and lying and, you know, doing all those sorts of things. I was supposed to be somewhere, and I didn't go there. And instead came to in a Mexican restaurant with shooter bottles, which have become my friends because they're easier to throw out your window while you're driving around town. And so that they don't come into the house, because by then my family had lost all trust in me. So like
They were checking everything.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they were at that point anymore or not, but at some points they were. And also, like, I just wasn't, you know, if I wasn't extra careful, I wasn't being careful at all, which meant that, like, it would have been easy to be like, oh, I lost this receipt. I'm going to go through the garbage and, like, what is this vanilla vodka shooter bottle doing in here? You know, like, you know, so even if it's not an intentional, like, I'm checking up on you, there's a good possibility I'm going to get caught if it's in my house. And so, anyway, so I wake up in a Mexican restaurant booth with food that I've ordered, eaten, and paid for, and shooter bottles that I don't remember buying, like at what liquor store I paid cash for those things. And I was like,
You fell asleep at the table?
passed out.
Oh.
Yeah, kind of, you know, did one of these things like, oh, I am late, you know, with the whole like, look at the phone and, oops, I'm supposed to be somewhere. And so the smartest thing I did was that I didn't go there and serve children, and instead called Hazelden, which is just up the road from me, like an hour. Good move to Minnesota if you're going to be in recovery. Like, there's lots of good options here for treatment. And I said, I am on my way. And they were like, no, that's not really how it works. I'm like, no, you see what's going to happen is I am going to show up. You are going to take care of me, and you will call my husband and let him know where I am, because like I am now so far gone in my disease that I don't want to be responsible anymore for me, or, you know, even the telling of it. They're like, yeah, that's really not how it works. And so kindly guided me through it. You know, it was just sort of one of these things, like I sat up, I looked at the time, I knew I had hit like the absolute, and I didn't know what else to do. It was sort of a split second moment that, like, there are kind of 2 options here. One is I can continue to do this and I'm probably going to die, or I could go get help. But like, there's not any wiggle room left. Stacy's out of options for, like, we've been wiggling enough.
Right.
So here it is. Yeah. So here it is. So yeah. So 2 days later, I joined the ranks.
So this is fascinating to me. So you call Hazelden and you say, hey, I need help. I'm coming up there now because I need help. And they say, not yet. They say no. They say
that's not how it works, because, you know,
so what do they need?
They need insurance, and they need, so you want to talk about barriers. Barrier number 1, you have insurance. If you don't have insurance, there's avenues. Like, lots of these places are backed up by foundations, but they have to go through all of these, you know, go through all of the literal bureaucratic type things first, right? So like, are you parked? Pull out your insurance card. Let's read off your insurance numbers. Let's get that going over here on the side. Also, we can't accept you. It's now like 5 o'clock. They don't take anybody past 3:30. If I am in dire need of medical help right now, medical help, right, versus treatment help. If I need medical help, take yourself to the emergency room or call for an ambulance. So, like, how drunk are you? Like, you know, get help, go to the emergency room. They'll detox you at the emergency room. And then, oh, by the way, we don't have a bed available, like, until X date, right? And so, and this is actually a bigger issue now. They're like not even taking waiting lists at some places anymore, because they're so full, and they have lost so many people, like, to job changes and, you know, all over the place, that there aren't enough people to serve even the beds that they could fill.
Right.
You know, it's kind of the hospital trickle down has become a treatment center trickle down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is not a good time to need to go into treatment right now. That's what my my outpatient therapist told me when she exited me, she said, it's not a good time to relapse, Stacy. I'm like, is it ever a good time to relapse? She's like, no, but particularly it is not a good time to relapse. You will not get the help you need as fast as you need it. It just won't happen.
Right.
It's just not out there. So
Fascinating. I'm going to digress a little bit and say this isn't just like happening at the hospitals, and this isn't just happening at like treatment centers. But
no,
like, we have a problem in our hemodialysis centers too, where they have open chairs, but because of the lack of staffing, they don't have open chairs.
Exactly.
So they'll say we're full, but they're not actually full. They just don't have the staff. And now this thing is happening that I find fascinating is that people are quitting, going to agencies and being placed back in the facility they just quit from so they can make even more money. Yeah. So that's happening too. So, okay.
Yeah.
So to get back to the really big point that you just made that I think is really fascinating, as we know, somebody who's dealing with addiction, right? If you catch them in the right moment, they might go to treatment. But if you catch them at the wrong moment, or if you lose your window of opportunity, they're going to fly on you and continue to do what they're doing.
Yes.
Right? Like, so what made you go 2 days later? Like, why did you not then say, pardon the expression, but fuck it. I'm just not going to do this.
Well,
You
I
can't
think
take me now. I'm not going.
Yeah, no. So I know that there are lots of people who do that. I know that happens. And so like I don't think that I think I had hit such a space where like I desperately didn't want to die, didn't necessarily want to live, but didn't want to die, and knew if I did that, didn't go and get help, that there was a good chance I was going to die. So there was that. But then the other thing that I think is amazing is, they're like, okay, we've got all your information. This was Hazelton. We've got all your information, and we'll call you back tomorrow. And I'm like, okay. So like, you're going to call me back tomorrow? Yeah, we're going to call you back tomorrow. I'm like, what am I supposed to do between now and then? And they're like, well, you can keep calling us. Like, we can talk to you. Like, we're available 24/7. I'm like, oh, okay. So if I need to, I can call you back. Yeah, you can call me back. And then I was like, wait, okay. Like, I'm going to go to treatment. Like, I now have things that I need to like get kind of like figured out, right? Like, I have to tell my husband, I have to tell my workplaces, I have to do this, I have to do that, and all that kind of thing. So
when you go and tell, okay, so let's pause for a moment. We've been, all right. So let's deal with this next little space and then we'll take a break.
Sure.
So when you come home and tell your husband, I'm going to go to treatment, what does he say?
So I'm not even that courageous. Instead, I am literally sitting in my parked car and I say,
wait, did you call him to do this, or was he in your
No, I texted him. I didn't call him. Texted him and said, I need to go to treatment. I'm coming home. They'll let me know when they can fit me in. And then there's just kind of, I mean, to his credit, there's just a lot of room. Like, he just kind of like gives a wide berth, So it's like, oh, you need to go to bed? You need to go to bed. Go to bed. Why don't you go to bed? That's a good idea. You're going to go to work tomorrow? Well, yeah, I mean, got one more day work. Sure, I'll go to work, I'll go to work and I'll take phone calls. So yeah, it's, that's.
So were you still drinking between the table and the time you left?
No, because I am an idiot and I did not know that you could do that. I thought that you had to go like sober.
Oh.
And so, So I'm kind of, fortunately I had been drinking off and on, like having days off in between, at times. And so fortunately I had not been to the space that I had been before, where it's like, 12 to 14 shots a day, and like trying to then have my body deal with that. So I didn't have the DTs. I didn't have any of the like seizure type activity and that kind of thing that can happen. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't know. Like, I went in and I blew a 0 2 days later.
Wow.
Yeah. They still kept me on the medical unit overnight because my blood pressure was out of control. But
I can see why that would be the case.
well, yeah, especially if you stop taking your blood pressure medicine in like July. And now it's December.
Why did you do that?
Because I just ran out of refills.
Okay.
Because when you're in addiction, you don't take care of yourself. Like, it's one of these things now that I'm like, oh, I have a prescription that needs to get renewed. It is a recovery activity. It is a good daily therapeutic activity to call the pharmacy and get that renewed.
Right.
Yeah.
And then what did work say when you're like, I'm going to take off for a month?
So that's the really bizarre thing, is that I had already resigned from the 2 jobs because I had a new job that was going to start after winter break at a different school. And so I was going to get rid of my 2 part-time jobs and go to a full-time job. So the part-time jobs, I just said, medical emergency, I'm out early. I'm out a week early. And the job that I was going to take, I called and told them the truth. And then they ended up holding the job for me and working with me when I got out to like work part-time until I was ready to deal with life and stuff. So yeah, that's also a huge thing. That's a huge
thing.
Yeah. Like no money coming in
right
for 40 days. Yeah.
Surprised they kept you for 40 days. We'll talk about that next after the break. But like before a while ago, you said you told somebody something and they let you go. Was that before the 2 part-time jobs?
Yeah. This is a job before. Yeah. I was unemployed from March of 21 until September of 21.
You were unemployed March of 21 to September of 21.
Yep. Then I worked these 2 part-time jobs for the fall.
Yep.
Had another job coming up waiting for me in the January of 22.
Whenever you were available again.
Oh yeah, it was supposed to be like, it was supposed to be like January 2nd, when school comes back from winter break.
Right.
But that wasn't going to work out.
Do you drive yourself to Hazleton?
No, I come home. I sleep for 2 nights. My husband took me. Yeah, okay. My husband took me up there. It's winter time, in Minnesota, so you don't want to leave your car parked for 14 to 28 days.
Oh yeah,
outside somewhere else.
Yeah. That's a good call. All right, so we're gonna take a break.
Yes.
But we're only breaking here, right? We're not like, it's not going to be a new day. It's not going to be like a week. You're people in my podcast land. You're going to like get this a week from now, and we're going to be in the same clothes in the same position we're in right now, because this is all the same conversation. It's just being broken up for you in the listening world. Okay.